Just make sure this is recording. Alright. I'm not very good at this stuff anyway, so I don't know why
Yeah, me either.
Next has me doing it, but it is what it is.
That's why it took me a couple minutes to figure out the microphone ordeal.
You're working now. Alright, hey everybody. It's John Myers here with Keenan Wind from Windy Fishing.
Hey
He's
guys.
nice enough to be on the show today with the fishing nerds from Lake Labs, so let's talk some fishing, huh? So Keenan, you are from Onamia. You live up in the northern part of the state, and you get to be around the big body of Mille Lacs. You're a guide. You do walleye guiding, you do musky guiding, you do bass guiding, you do it all. Just first off, start with your story. How did you get into guiding? I'd like to hear it all, man.
Yeah, so from very early beginnings, my grandpa was a walleye guide. My great grandpa bought Kent's Resort in, I believe, the tail end of the 60s and owned it for about 20 years. So Kent's Resort was located in Waukon Bay. That's where my grandpa got his start to guiding. And Grandpa guided and tournament walleye fished. So I was pre-fishing tournaments with Grandpa and baiting hooks for his clients, and just taking out our friends fishing. Grandpa had friends that we would take out fishing, and I would help. There's a really funny story. We were walleye fishing. We were lindy rigging. And I was probably 7, 8, maybe 9 years old, and I was feeding a fish. I was feeling a fish, and I had just released my finger, and Gordy, my grandpa's friend, said, "Hey, why is your line doing that?" I said, "Oh, watch this," and caught a 26, 27 inch walleye. But it was just kind of very very early beginnings, fishing walleyes with Grandpa. Grandpa was a big walleye guy, but we fished bass. My reward after a long day of trolling walleyes with Grandpa, pre-fishing tournaments, or whatever our day entailed, my reward was to pull up to a rock pile and catch a bass. And it was very basic back then. That was before Mille Lacs smallmouth were pressured. It was a quarter-ounce jig, had no white twister tail, and you could catch any smallmouth in the lake. You try that now, and you're going to be working pretty hard. But yeah, that's how it all started with Grandpa, and then 2 years ago, I started guiding for Matt Trino of Matt's Fishing, and I guided for Matt full time. First running Tilly, and now I run his 621 VS Ranger. Musky guiding, bass guiding, walleye guiding, learning it
I
all,
don't know.
and
Do you
spending.
like one over the other? Or do you like them all?
Um, I really like a couple walleye days a year. I really like the shallow water bite, for everything. Like, I would say targeting that shallow water bite for walleyes and smallmouth is probably my favorite. Just because at any given point in time there could be a 28-inch walleye up on the shallow rocks or shallow anything. Um, and then there could be a 6-pound smallmouth right behind it, or a 40-inch pike, or a 50-pound muskie right behind it. So I would say the spring, and I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but um, just when they're shallow, shallow fishing is what I'm going to say
Nice.
for that.
So it sounds like you started with your grandpa. I would love to see his maps and your maps all combined with that big lake on there. I'm sure there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
things
for
I don't
sure.
know.
Grandpa's still got a global map, an old school global map that he
Wow.
takes out when we go fishing. I bought his boat from him, but he still takes out the global map, and I mean it's not even a GPS unit; it's a chart plotter.
Sweet.
You don't even actually have a map or anything, but you have waypoints like you wouldn't believe. He's got so many waypoints on there; it's insane. I mean, it's like you need to specifically zoom in. Like, you can see the outlines of flats with that he chart plotted out himself. With yeah, it's just crazy.
Well, it's no wonder he's been winning so many tournaments. Sounds like it
Yeah,
runs in the
for sure.
blood, man.
Yeah, hopefully, in
Yeah. So you've
theory.
been fishing for Matt Trino, you said. Now, how many years
Yep.
have you been doing that?
So I've been with Matt since 2019. And yeah, I love fishing with Matt. I actually purchased my first boat from Mr. Trino. I was 12 years old, and I purchased a little 14-foot Alumacraft from Matt, and that's how Matt and I started conversating. And then then I was the little kid bugging him for to take me fishing, and then I got on his Pathfinder, and of course I fell in love with the
Oh
Pathfinder.
yeah, who
Um,
wouldn't?
and ever since then, we've just fished together, and we've had some really interesting times. Just with one of the first times that he ever took me out musky fishing, we moved 11 and caught one and whiffed. I whiffed on several. That was years ago, but it was just a really crazy experience.
Yeah, well, it sounds like I know I've been following you guys on social media and seeing all the fish you've been catching, so I know you guys know what you're doing up there. So tell me, let's talk Mille Lacs. Just that's kind of your home body of water. It's
Yep,
such a big
absolutely.
it's such a big body of water. I mean, I could fish it my whole life and never understand it. Um, I guess a question to you would be, what would you give advice to like a new guy coming up to try this big body of water for musky fishing? Where would you start? How would you begin? What would I bring? Kind of walk me through the process.
Yeah, so everybody's got their own opinion on lax muskies, and the best way that I can summarize lax muskies. So it's such a low population density. Depending on what figure or what number you have in mind, the number of adult muskies in the lake. You're working with, where some lakes in the state of Minnesota, you're working with one fish per couple acres, or even maybe talking, starting to border fish per acre rather than acre per fish. Well, Mille Lacs, you're looking at a lot of acres per fish. So, number one best advice is don't burn out on Mille Lacs. Mille Lacs has beat me up. It's beat all of my friends up, people that have been fishing muskies for much longer than I have. So my tip is, and I guess, so don't get burnt out. And the secondary part of that is fish when there's high percentage times. It's no secret that Mille Lacs has one of the best opener bites in the state of Minnesota. I mean, everybody, you go to the first Saturday of June, you pull into any boat ramp or any relatively close vicinity to musky fishing, a musky spot, or any of the bays and that, and there will be scads and scads of boats. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a lot of fish are caught on opener, that kind of post spawn time. Um, but opener is a good one, and then the other time where people generally target muskies is the Tullaby spawn, which is late fall. As the ice is nearing, and as we were all trying to get one more day of fishing in. But yeah, fish the high percentage times. And you can, and don't get me wrong, you can get muskies and blacks all year round. That's not what I'm trying to say, but if you're going to learn the lake and you're going to try and, I would start fishing those high percentage times. And the trouble is there's just so much basin in Mille Lacs. You go to other bodies of water in the state of Minnesota that have a lot of basin, but maybe the Tullaby are more predictable, or, but you can drive across Mille Lacs in midsummer, in 35 feet of water,
yeah,
and out in the middle of the bowl, and you can mark Tullaby for miles, and when there aren't that many muskies in the lake itself, it'd be a difficult population of open water fish to fish. Now, a lot of guys troll it and they're successful, but it's definitely a waiting game,
yeah.
and
Let's talk about
um,
that. So, say you're out in the middle of the basin and you come across, like you said, miles of tullibee. Do you have an approach to that? Do you go in? Do you start trolling? Do you start casting?
so if I'm gonna fish open water in Mille Lacs, there have been a couple times. If I have a pot of Tullaby and it's the fall, then I'll cast it. But if it's the summer, I want to cover ground in the summer. Those fish probably aren't nearly as active as they are during the Tullaby spawn. They're more or less just out there cruising Tullaby pods. And so my go-to tactic, as well as I would say the majority of anglers, is to troll those big pods of Cisco or Tulaby out in um, during the summer. I mean, I like to run a good spread of baits. So the more buddies you can have in the boat, the better. Cover a couple different depths and just run, run a lot. Put your time in, and bring bring lots of entertainment.
On such a
I
big
like
body of
to.
water, I would imagine putting the time in is kind of a big deal. What, just to put you on the spot, if you had to guess how much time in your whole life have you fished that lake?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a pretty crazy. Well, if you figure, I was with Grandpa. Grandpa was a plumber pipe fitter, so Grandpa actually got to take off quite a bit of time in the summers from shutdowns and that.
Yeah.
So there were weeks where we'd spend 40, 50 hours out there, and over the last couple of years with guiding and with personally fishing, I've put somewhere between probably 250 and 400 hours on Mille Lacs for the last 3-ish years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to be nearing 1,000, 1,200, maybe 1,500 hours on Mille Lacs. I mean, that's a really rough estimate, but as a kid, I mean, we lived just down the road from Mille Lacs, so I would get buddies to drive me to the lake and drop my boat off and leave my trailer at the ramp, like just a little 14-foot John boat, and I was out trolling walleye or I used to dive a lot on Mille Lacs, like just go swim over
Yeah.
reefs and that. You never really understand a spot until you swim it once,
You
and
would go
it's
dive
just
and find where you're fishing.
yeah. So like a lot of what's really cool is a lot of the reefs in Mille Lacs are big piles of granite actually. So those piles of granite are really interesting to see. You can see them on side imaging and you see these structures, but um, you don't truly understand until a reef until you actually look at it. I mean, and you can get a really good understanding on a very, very, very clear, calm day. Like my favorite day to be on Mille Lacs, just to spend the time, or just if I was going to go and learn. Like if you had no wind and it was midsummer, there's no algal bloom, and it's a sunny day,
Yeah.
and it's I mean just glass calm. You could understand so much of Mille Lacs by just driving around. I mean, and just physically looking. That's a lot of what I used to do when I had my little 14 footer. So the 14 footer had a 6 horse Evinrude, and I would just kick it into gear. So you're traveling at a mile, maybe 2 per hour, and I would just, I mean, say there's a stretch where I know there's a rock pile, and I didn't have a map or anything back then. I mean, I was just going out and fishing.
Yeah.
Um, one of Grandpa's rods that I stole out of the boat that morning, and whatever I
One of
could,
his thousands, I'm
whatever
sure.
yeah, whatever Mr. Twister I could grab, and I would just go and kick the boat into gear and just look and find, and
Find all the
and
bits
that's
that I lost on the granite rocks that you're talking about, I'm sure.
yeah, exactly.
So you, how many years you been guiding again?
So I've been guiding for Matt for 2 seasons,
Okay.
and then unofficially for a couple years before that. Just a handful of trips here there, but full time for 2 years.
All right. And you got any good? What's the one most memorable trip you've ever taken on a guide trip? Any good fish?
Um,
Any stories?
so there's there's probably two.
Love the Bureau
First of
trout.
all, this June we heard, or this June we had a pike trip, where before the trip I said, kind of that late June, that mid June period, a lot of your pike fishing is just musky fishing and hoping for a big pike. Um, and I asked the clients before the trip, I said, what do you guys think if we catch a muskie? And they were like, "Oh, that would be great. That would be great." And they said, and I asked them, "Oh, do you guys want to troll at all?" And they said, "No, we prefer casting." Okay, perfect. So we go and we cast, and conditions weren't ideal for casting. One of the gentlemen was a bit older,
Windy on Mille
so
Lacs, who would have thought?
yeah, exactly. So we started trolling, and we actually put 3 fish in the boat, 3 muskies in the boat. The first was around 30 inches. Second was 43, and third was 44. But the coolest part isn't the number of fish that we caught. So the first fish came, and then about 20 minutes later, the second fish came. And so I had in the 621, and we're using casting rods. Like this was, we weren't set up for trolling. I didn't bring the trolling gear. They said they wanted to cast. So I had 8'6" St. Croix rods and like casting rods, right?
Yeah.
Um, Put them in the rod holder. So we just released this other fish, and we're really careful, and we got some really great pictures. And the fish swam off, and after reviving him for a second, fish swam off, get the net back in, start setting lines. And so I set one line on the starboard side, and I set the other one in the rod holder, walked back up to my walked back up to my captain's chair, and the rod was already bent over, clicker was buzzing, and that was that 43-inch fish. So that was super cool.
So back to
Um,
back.
yeah, and then so that's my best musky story. My best smallmouth story is we had would have been 2 years ago, so 2019. We had about a period of 45 minutes in the evening where we caught some of the biggest smallmouth I've ever seen, and it was back to back to back 4-pounders.
Nice.
Me and both of my clients, they insisted that I fish with them that day, and we all caught 4-pounders. I mean, it was just it was 4-pounder after 4-pounder. I think altogether, if we were counting our 5 fish, we would have had well over 22, 23 pounds, which is a pretty phenomenal bag of smallmouth. But
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that because anytime I think Mille Lacs growing up, I grew up in the cities here. I always thought I'm going to Mille Lacs, I'm going walleye fishing. That's what we do.
yeah,
We're going
yeah,
there for opener. If I get lucky, I'll catch a nice pike. These last 3 or 4 years, I mean, now it's one of the most well-known smallmouth lakes in the country. I mean, have you seen the bass
yeah.
population just boom the last couple of years, or has it just always been that way and we just never really knew about
Um, the bass definitely thrived after the introduction of zebra mussels. So, zebra mussels were introduced to Mille Lacs in the early 2000s, I believe. And that kind of started to make them take off. And I think the majority of the focus on bass fishing now, they were there all when I was a kid. Not at the exact population that they are now. Um, like I said, we'd pull up to a rock pile at the end of trolling walleyes, and we'd catch a couple bass. Um, but the big thing with the Mille Lacs smallmouth population is it's just ever since the Bassmaster came,
it. Yeah,
everybody
right.
everybody travels. Everybody wants to travel to Mille Lacs. We were number one in the country for quite a while, or number one in the world for quite a while. Now I think we're down that list quite a ways, and that's just pressure. Pressure's definitely been a factor in that, as well as keeping smallmouth. There's still a lot of people that are keeping smallmouth despite the insanely low slope on the age to growth regression. But that's another topic, I guess.
I can only do so much, right? It is what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
All right. So now we've talked Mille Lacs, talked the big body of water and everything you've done. You're right up there along some of the most musky-filled lakes in the state. You're surrounded by beautiful water. You're not too far from northern Minnesota, where you got Cass and Leech and Bemidji, any of those other ones. Have you done any exploring? I'm not trying to get any spots in lakes or anything
yeah,
like that, but
yeah. So
you guide on
I
any of the
started
lakes?
Yeah, so exploring is actually like, I spent so much of my childhood on Mille Lacs, fishing with grandpa and fishing, wherever, fishing just in general. And exploration has kind of been my main thing over the last year and a half, or season and a half. I explore some of that northern stuff. Since I go to school at University of Minnesota Morris, I've spent a lot of time around Alexandria area,
Okay.
and we've found some real gems out here. Um, the biggest thing for me this year is I bought a jet boat last fall. And I'm very, very excited to see where that'll take me. So many times I drive over a bridge or something, and I see a spot or see a log jam or
Yeah.
see something on the river, and before that wasn't something that I was able to capitalize on, and now finally I'll be able to take time and go explore those some of those skinny water things,
Yeah.
skinnier rivers and that. Um, but yeah, exploration is like it's my favorite thing to pull up to a new lake and just drive around for a while and then scope it out and scan it out. Hummingbird side imaging has understanding side imaging well has revolutionized the way that I fish. It was on Mille Lacs. That's probably a topic that most people are really interested in. So on Mille Lacs, um, so this kind of ties in with my number one tip for Mille Lacs is fish high percentage areas, and for me that is the perfect density of weeds. Now, I don't have this pattern as dialed as I would like to, but I know what I like to see on side imaging for me to know that muskies live there. And so this last fall, I applied some of that to other bodies of water that I fish frequently, and I sat down and I threw out any waypoints that I had on the lake. I didn't care where I saw fish previously. I didn't care what had happened previously. What I did is I threw out all the waypoints, drove around the lake, and I only marked um, weed beds or patches of weeds that were the density that I wanted. What I had learned from Mille Lacs and fishing. If you fish bays on Mille Lacs, well, you can fish dense weed beds for miles in the bays on Mille Lacs. And if you do that, you're just not going to be all that successful. You need the perfect density and the perfect
Well,
mixture
dig
of
more into
everything.
that. What am I looking for? Am I looking for a certain amount of rockage and a certain amount of weeds and cabbage, or am I
Um,
one or the
I
other?
would say it's just the right density of weeds. And it's really tough to explain that. But for me, it's hard to explain. I run Hummingbird, Mega SI, and that has revolutionized everything. Like I've got pictures of smallmouth on Mega where you can see the gill plate. And I've got a handful of pictures. I've got a handful of pictures of muskies where you can see like very very distinctly an indent for the eye and the gill plate, and like
Really?
that Mega imaging is insane. And I'm fortunate in the sense that I've stared at it for the last 600-700 hours over the course of the last couple of seasons. Um, Stared at that Mega specifically. And I would say that that's if you get really comfortable with that Mega and you get really comfortable, and the other part about that too is kind of tying in with the understanding the reef thing. You start to understand Mega imaging more when you can actually see and correlate what you're seeing on Mega with what you're seeing in the water. So that's another big thing with like just driving around on a clear, calm day. Watch your imaging, watch your rock piles, watch this, watch that, and really understand what that image is trying to, what that image means to you. And if as far as explaining to you what weed density,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really hard to explain that without first establishing a very very good understanding of what you're seeing on your side imaging. Um, and if you're going to target fish in the weeds on Mille Lacs, there's plenty of weeds, and I guess without actually showing somebody, it's really difficult to explain that, what I'm looking for and what, so many people buy these fish finders, and I guess that's, another tip or whatever you want to, however you want to do it, is, be comfortable with your fish finder, know what you're seeing,
Right.
watch videos, and, not to blast guides or anything, but hop in a guide's boat and really, I've had clients tell me that they understand more about their fish finders in 15 minutes of being in my boat and showing them, oh, that's the reef you're looking at in the water. Here's it on the screen,
Yeah.
and just kind of explaining highlights, contrast, how to set those graphs. really do your research online if you can't afford a guide. Otherwise, hop in a guide's boat, and I'm sure most guides will be more than happy to explain to you how to use everything, how to set everything up,
I tell you what,
and
for
just
our next
establish.
video, I'll be hopping in your boat and you can walk me all through it while we're trolling the lines.
Perfect, perfect.
But I totally understand what you mean. I mean, I have no top of the line fish finder, but even the one I have, I barely understand, and I think I do. So, it might I got to pay more attention and research to it. But it's like you said, the more time you put in scouting a lake and figuring out what you're looking at, the more it's going to pay off in the long run. So
Yeah, absolutely. I actually started deleting the majority of my waypoints. If it's marking something really special, then I'll keep it. But um, like within the next month or two before fishing really kicks up, I'm going to delete all the majority of my waypoints just so that and that's so that I'm not fishing a spot. I never want to be fishing a spot. I want to be fishing structure as it changes year to year. I want to be fishing specifically what I want to fish, not a waypoint. You know what I mean?
yeah, kind of gives you some false hope maybe in some degree.
Yeah, yep.
You can always just make sure you save them on your Lake Labs app. You'll be just fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's kind of everything I wanted to touch on. I do have one more question. I mean, you're kind of an entrepreneur in yourself. I mean, I know you're in school now, but you do the guiding, and I know you do a lot of buying and selling and building. You always got a project going on, something crazy. Every time I'm watching you on social media, you're welding or buying a boat and fixing it and selling it, or putting in a new floor. I think was one. So, what's your latest project? What are you working on now?
So right now is my jet boat. It's just a little 1648 Monarch jet, and that boat it got a new transom. The previous transom wasn't rotten, but I'm really meticulous in how I want things to function. I really need everything to function at a high level. You have a breakdown in mid season. 2 seasons ago, I had my boat break down for about a month out of the season, and I lost out on so much fishing, personal fishing, because of that. And that's one of the reasons that I spend a lot of time in the off season prepping boats. Um, so the jet didn't need a transom, but I redid the transom entirely. Now I'm redoing casting decks. I had it sandblasted. I'll paint it, just to make sure that it's performing at the highest level that I can possibly get. The other thing that I spend a lot of time in the off season doing is tying flies, tying bucktails, tying hair jigs, marabou hair jigs. I just posted a YouTube video about how I tie marabou hair jigs.
Perfect.
But I'm trying to record more of this boat stuff. I've got probably like 2 3 hours of this boat recording that I want to post at some point in time. But lots of boat work, lots of fly tying. This will be the first year that I'm actually offering guiding on the fly, as I previously hadn't. So I'm really preparing so that I'll have more time fishing, less time tackle prep. Overall, just lots of boat prep, tackle prep, all that sorts of stuff.
Fun stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I know I've
absolutely.
got one of your bucktails, so they're good stuff, man, and I appreciate it using it.
Yeah, yeah, I
You tie
appreciate
some
it
really
too.
nice stuff. So if you haven't checked out his channel yet, actually, where can they find you? I know you're on social media. Do you got a website? How do I get a
Yep.
guide
Yeah. So I've
together?
got
By
my website is windyfishing.com. Um, YouTube is Windy Fishing Guide Service. Instagram is Windy Fishing. Facebook's Windy Fishing. And I try and post pretty regularly just about everything that's going on. I've got Ducky the boat dog,
yeah,
a little
the new
British lab,
additions.
and I've got all the boat work and that. I mean, even if and then yeah, I'm buying and selling boats and helping friends with boats and all that sorts of fun stuff. I'm really passionate about fishing, but I'm also really passionate about boats, and I like replacing things in boats and fixing things, and
Well,
um, but yeah,
could be worse, right?
yeah, it's an expensive hobby, but it's a hobby that I really enjoy. So
All right, man. Well, I appreciate your time hanging out with us, sharing your story with our guests and listeners. And you heard him. If you're looking for a trip on Mille Lacs or have any advice, give him an email or a shout, or I'm sure he'll be happy to book you a trip or help you with any way he can. So,
absolutely.
Windy Fishing, Keenan, it's a pleasure.
Yep. Nice talking to you, John.
We'll see you later. All right, buddy.
Yep. Talk to you later.
All right,
Bye.
bye. Oh, and it gone.